Thanks to be here for this talk about securing the JVM. What an introduction. I mean, now I have a lot of pressure. Who here is using the JVM already? Who here is a Java developer? Yeah, nearly everyone. Scala developer? A few hands. Groovy developer? A few hands. Kotlin developer? Yeah, proud hands. Great, you are in the right room. I'm Nicola Franco. It's my first Devoxx Ukraine. Actually, I think it's the first Devoxx Ukraine for everyone. But I was speaking at Java Days before, Devoxx Conf as well. So before that time, I introduced myself as a developer. Since 3 months, I have a developer advocate. So actually, I'm paid to be here and to talk to you. If you like my talk, please provide feedback. Please give a feedback to my employer so that I can get there again. My employer is Exoscale, and perhaps if you were a bit curious, you found a little karteczka inside your bag. This is 20 euros, so you can try our cloud. We are a cloud provider. We provide like cloud instances inside of Europe that are protected by the data privacy law. Not like US company, which are not protected because of the Cloud Act. If you are interested about privacy, read more about the Cloud Act. We are located in Europe. We have 4 data centers, 2 in Switzerland, 1 in Austria, and 1 in Germany. And yeah, we have great support. So you might know Java, even if you don't do it now, and you know these things about the reflection API, right? Who doesn't know about the reflection API? Nobody? So it's very easy. I can show you a snippet of code, and you can tell me what it does. So what does this snippet do? You don't see it because I'm in front of it. That sucks a lot. OK, and if I do like that, it gets much better. I am agile. No, I'm not asking you whether it's a bad practice or not. I'm asking you what the snippet does. Bravo. So basically, if you run this stuff, you have crafted, you have designed your code to be private, and still someone wants to access it, and it just uses the API, and then it can access the declare field. Where is the magic? Where is the magic line? Sorry? In which line? You can't see. Ah, what blin. Asi čas, Luce? Adinatsat. So I have answer here. Yeah, here is the magic. If I remove this line, I get what I expect. I mean, I cannot access the field. So this is the magic line. And who here never used this trick? 2, 3, 4, 5? Well, I wait a bit because you never used it. OK. Probably you're too young, because at some point you will need to use it. Like you have this nice product, this nice library, this nice framework, and it just doesn't suit exactly what you want because they have this private method, and, well, let's make it not private anymore. So actually, this is the GRE, and it's used in a lot of language and frameworks. Even if you don't use it, I'm sure, I mean, if you are a Groovy developer, by default, you use it. You don't know it, perhaps, but you use it. If you are a Spring developer, who here is a Spring developer? Yeah, half the room, more than half. I mean, you use it. Hibernate or any GPA framework, you use it. Everybody uses it. Even if you don't use it yourself, the library or the framework that you use uses it. So basically, it's widespread. But it gets a lot worse, because that was like kind of acceptable. Now, if I have this code, who can tell me what that does? It's also reflection API, but it gets deeper into the reflection. And what happens? It changes the type. Woohoo! So we are using Java. We are a statically typed language. And basically, when I print the hidden hint, there is a string inside. I didn't know this trick before 3 years. 3 years ago, I didn't know about it. Who knew about that? A few hands. That's good. Basically, Java is stated as a statically typed language, but you can do a lot of crap on it. You can make it dynamic. It's not static anymore, and I'm not on the good stuff. Yes. And the JVM itself offers you a lot of API. You can make network calls. You can compile code on the fly. You can execute code at runtime. And of course, you can tell me, yeah, but we have those static analyzers that we check for, yeah, double-check locking, this kind of stuff. Doesn't work that well for some patterns. You can check for set accessible, but for the rest, it will be harder. You can have code reviews to check that you don't do too much, but as soon as you've got two people who agree to let something pass, it passes. You can have security teams even. Who here has a security team? 3 people. OK, so imagine everybody has a security team, which is obviously not the case. I've met two kinds. Yeah, some people are laughing their ass off. There are obviously, in my experience, 2 kinds of security teams. The compliance checkbox kind of people, basically, check, check, check. The rest, they don't give a shit. They are not technical at all. They just want to prove that we follow the process. As soon as the process is followed, or at least the boxes are checked, they don't care. And the good ones, the ones who are really skilled, those guys, they have no time for you because they are actually working. They are doing something. So that doesn't leave much choice, actually. There is a nice conception called Steganography. And Steganography is the art of hiding information, data, inside of data. So, for example, you could hide, I don't know, code inside a picture. So imagine, I will do the demo first, and I will tell about the process later. So I will have this text file, which contains valid Java code. I have written something inside. I will add stuff, because I just want to prove you that it's real time. And I have something sweet, cute, me. Not harmful at all. I mean, you trust this kitty, right? No. Come on, you should trust kitties. Black cat. Yeah, it's black cat, OK. So I have a process that basically will hide this code inside this image. Nothing happens. Yeah, something happens. And now I have same picture. I mean, obviously it's the same picture, but there is code inside of it. And what I can do is decrypt the image, extract the code out of it, execute it. I forgot to compile, but I compile it. I have an issue with my IDE. And basically, it's not super hard to do. So I have taken a source called Steganography.java because I didn't want to handle the bytes myself. But basically, I take the picture that has been embedded with code. I save the code that is inside in a temporary file on my hard drive. I compile the source. I run it. I'm done. Like 42 lines of Java, simple Java code. Now imagine something. It's a very simple process. It's a no-brainer. I'm a bad guy. Obviously, I'm not. I'm a super good guy. But imagine, let's make a leap of faith that I'm a very bad guy. What I could do is I could create a library that reads images and publish it to Maven Central. And because it's useful, it gets used more and more and more and more. And now I can use it inside of my project. And when I'm committing images to the repository in my, I don't know, my private banking company, then I put some code inside of it. And in production, it gets executed. That would be very, very bad, right? But of course, the security team that we mentioned, they check that the libraries that you are using are safe, right? Right. And you check the codes of the library that you are using if you have no security team, right? Who doesn't check the code of his libraries? Hey, come on, guys. Who does check? 4 people, 5, great. How do you make sure that the source code is like creates the same binary if you don't build it yourself? Sorry? The SHA-1, yeah? The only way, okay, you must trust the SHA-1 at some point. The only way that you make sure that the source creates the binary is to basically build the library yourself. Nobody does it. Nobody does it. And it can be even more devious. Basically, I could create a real library with no steganography inside for some versions, wait until users are using it, wait until everybody did their security check, and at a later time introduce the steganographic feature. That would be pretty bad, right? How are you sure that nobody is already doing it? Who remembers that stuff? Yeah, applets. And actually, applets, yeah, they were not that good, but they had a very good feature. They run into a sandbox JVM. Because the designer of the applets, they know that you are downloading code from the internet, and that is code that perhaps is not so safe. And it can do a lot of stuff, accessing your file system, reading your files with your credentials. So basically, the JVM allows already to have 2 modes. What I call the God mode, you can do everything, and the sandbox mode, where you can only do what you configure the JVM to do, and not more. And this is achieved through something called the security manager. Who knows about the security manager? Half of the room. Who used the security manager? 4 or 5 hands. Who is using right now the security manager on his project every time in production? No one. And that's my problem. I've worked as a consultant during 17 years on the JVM. I've never seen it used in production. Well, I've never seen it used at all, to be honest. So everything is secured. You run in a bank, you cannot cross network zones, you cannot do a lot of stuff. But as soon as it touches the JVM, It's free buffet for everyone. So the first problem is, how do you activate the security manager? Well, you should always use the command line to start your Java program with the property Java Security Manager. There is an alternative. Inside of your code, you can activate the Security Manager, which is pretty stupid because you don't know what ran before. So it's not a great idea. I mention it only for the reference. Notice also that it changed between Java 8 and Java 9, so that the policy file, which is the configuration of the permissions, has changed location. Yeah, I'm sorry, I will just move a bit. Yeah, I will give the slide anyway. So before it was in grlib security, and now it's in conf.security. The policy file itself is referenced in the java.security. So if you want to use another file for your JVM default, you can use it, and you can configure this Java security stuff. But I will tell you later that it's not the way to do it. The way to do it is in the first line. Basically, with the first line, you are telling the JVM, I want to use this policy file, and I want it to replace the default one. So there are two equal signs. In the second line, you will add permissions. So you will add permission to the default security file, policy, and you will add this my policy. So basically, if the JVM is already compromised, if someone has access to the default policy file, doesn't bring nothing. So the only thing to do is to replace everything, because only you know what you want, and you don't know what the default will be actually. And let's be frank, you can have, I don't know if you still do it, but it's still possible to have one JVM, multiple applications, but then each application should have its own policy file if you run onto the same server. I don't believe many people still do that. They all have their Docker container, blah, blah. But anyway, it's still possible. And in security, in information security, this is this principle, the principle of least privilege. You give only the permissions that are necessary to do the task and not more. Remember when you were young, you had a permission issue with Apache in PHP, and you shmod 777, and it works. This is not the principle of least privilege. This is the principle of least effort. It works also, but as a student, it's good. As a professional, it's not anymore. So basically, what you want to allow the JVM is only the permissions that you need for your application to run correctly, and not more. Do you agree? Yeah. So by default, the default permissions are not that many. The default permission on Java 9, you can listen on some ports, and you read a few system properties, and not all. So not that many. The good thing about permissions, if you get into the JDK source code, they are enforced in the GRE. So I'm not as good as to tell you it's not possible to bypass that. Probably if you try to manage the class loaders and do some black magic stuff, should probably be possible. But it's very deep. So the set accessible, this is the code for the set accessible permission, for the, set accessible method that I showed you earlier, that some of you recognize. And you can see there is a call to the security manager. And it tells, if it's not null, if there is a security manager, then check if I have the permission to do that. There are a lot of permissions. This is just a sum up. Interestingly enough, there is a permission called all permission. It has a usage. I will show it later. It has a very interesting usage. Of course, in production, again, it's completely useless. You cannot give a permission to have all permission because, yeah, back to square one. But you have permission to read property, because some property should not be accessible by your application. To write, especially to write properties, to change stuff. You have file access, you have reflection permission, runtime, socket. You also have permission to access the desktop. You know, when you copy-paste password, you have a permission to access the clipboard. Now, imagine if one Java program running on a server could access the clipboard. I mean, probably your server, your JVM on the server, doesn't use AWT, right? But still, it has access to the clipboard. The structure of the polyfill file is very, very simple, and I simplify it even more. So basically, you have this grand code base, which jar, and I'm just in the context of the standalone executable jar, to simplify things further, permission, name of the permission, and further parameters if the need be. Are you a bit scared now? Wow. It's already so late, no feedback. Are you scared, yes or no? No, no, you are not scared because you are basically allowing the JVM to do everything and nobody uses a security manager, but you are not scared. That's fine. So, okay, I will do another demo then. Who knows about the attach API? Okay, imagine that you don't know about the security manager, you don't know about permissions, you are running a banking application. So I run my banking application very easily. This is a Spring Boot application, by the way. It works pretty well. And here, it's a REST API, so I'm sending money. And inside, sorry, it should get executed here. Yes. So now, if I go on the attach application, it should tell me, hey, I successfully transferred 50 whatever from account 1 to account 2. Again, not super rocket science. And if I change the parameters, just to be sure, okay, this is a simple, stupid REST API. Of course, I'm not doing anything. I'm just writing into the log because I'm super lazy, but you understood the point, right? Now, imagine that I created a program to basically change the bytecode of the running JVM. The JVM is still running at runtime. It shouldn't be possible, right? It should be pretty bad if it was possible. Who is scared now? Only one guy. I scared only. More people are scared. Good. I knew the kitten was too nice. I knew it. The attach API allows you to modify and update bytecodes at runtime. The only thing that you need is to run onto the same machine to have access to the PID. Who here is working in banking or for a bank anyway? 1, 2, if I wait more, perhaps more hands. Okay. Medicine. Okay. Aeronautics. No, nobody. Self-driving cars could be pretty frightening, right? This is basically what happens. I mean, if you are in the gaming industry, you don't care. I stole all your Candy Crush credits. Wow. Banking, aeronautics, stuff that handles money or human life, you can get into pretty heavy trouble. And this is happening right now. Basically, I updated the bytecode, the running bytecode of a JVM at runtime. And what I can do is I can say, now if I run the application again, so I stop the JVM, I run it again, nothing happened. The bytecode is the same as originally. I mean, that's pretty frightening. I left no trace. There is no trace. I mean, that's the best hack. Someone checking the bytecode after restarting the JVM will see nothing. So, thanks. I don't know, I didn't check. It was just to scare you, not to provide any solution. And I mean, the solution is very simple. It's called the security manager. So basically, if I use a security manager, the Java security.manager, access denied. Sorry, up, better, like, yeah, doesn't work. I have an access denied. That's what I told you, because I have no permission to do that. Set accessible is not acceptable. I cannot use reflect permission, suppress access check. So the question that comes now is, how do you create the permission file? The policy file. How do you create your permissions? OK, let's do it. I will use the Spring Pet Clinic. Who knows about the Spring Pet Clinic? Yeah. Oh, not that many. A third of the room. OK. So I will show it very quickly. So, up. This is a super nice application where I can, when I can find owners of pets, and I can check the details of the owner, I can edit the owner, I can add a new pet, I can check for veterinarians, and of course, what you should always do, check that if an error happens, you don't have the 500 Tomcat stack trace, you have a nice error page, stuff like that. So this is a Spring Pet Clinic. This is not a real-world application, but this is not Hello World either. So it's between a real world and Hello World. It's not trivial. Let's craft a policy file for this application. So I've already this JVM policy stuff, and I will run my application with it. And it comes very fast. It tells me, hey, you basically don't have this permission and those parameters. So I can very easily create permission. And I add the java.util.permission. And I add that. And here I don't forget the comma, because there is a very strict syntax. And I run it again. And now I have a new problem. I need a new permission. So there are different ways to do it. One way is doing that. The other is doing, I don't remember the syntax exactly. Let's try that. Now I have an issue because, yeah, it's here. OK. Let's continue. OK. No? Yeah, you're still with me? OK, nobody is complaining, so that's fine. I will continue. Until somebody is complaining, saying, might be a bit. How long do I have? 2 days? Yeah. Yeah, 2 days. You have 2 days to stay with me to create the policy file. No, that's the issue. Basically, I believe one of the reasons the policies are not used is that it takes of time. It takes a lot of time to create a policy file because you only want the permissions that are just like the least privileged. So you don't want to have Joker character, you just want to have the list. And, well, the final file is, and I took some shortcuts already, because at some point I had enough. So the question is, how do you create a policy file that, I mean, in a normal way, without taking 2 days, because that you have to do that at every update of the application, at every update of the library, not only to add new permissions, but to remove permissions that are no more necessary. It's really a time-consuming process. Well, I told you about the all permission, and basically it is where it plays. So I'm using the all permission, and I'm logging every permission. And the all policy just say all permissions. So when I'm launching with this stuff, of course there are a lot of redundancy and duplicates. Okay. But it doesn't stop there. Because now, at this point, I have additional permissions at runtime when I start interacting with the application. So it's not only enough to allow the application to start, I basically have to go through all the features, all the links of the application to get the whole permission set. But obviously, you have automated tests today that do that, right? Of course. Who hasn't 100% code coverage on the front end? Yeah, of course. Nobody has 100%. But even if you don't test anything, you should create a Selenium bot that goes through every link, every button, everything, that does everything. And afterwards, you can copy everything. And here you can see my buffer was not big enough. It's also perhaps because I reset the stuff. And here starts the fun part. Here you see you have a port, right? If I write down this port in the permission file, in the policy file, I restart the application, it won't work because the port will have changed. Because Spring Boot chooses a random port between a range. Doesn't work. So you have to use the Joker character. Fun parts 2. I don't know why, but in the caching API of the GRE, they say if this string is in the list of system properties. So you cannot explicitly list every property. You have to use the Joker character again to say every system property must be readable. That sucks. And so on, and so forth. So this is my final file. Not this one, obviously. This is my final file. Again, I took some shortcuts. Here you can see how Spring works. It will try to read the property file. It will read the XML file, YAML, blah, 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 blah. Here you can If you know Spring Boot, you can see this is a profile. This is the production profile. And then you can see it checks in the application, it tells in the documentation. So in the same folder as the application, in a config folder. And here you can see that it accesses also random stuff. But now that you have this file explicitly tells you every permission that you need. It is much easier to check what this is allowed to do than to check the whole application. This should be under source control. This should be managed by the team. It should be code reviewed every time there is an update on that. It can be given to the security team, you know, the good ones who have no time to do reviews on the code. Well, it's pretty easy to read that file. And now if I start the application with this file, so first it starts, which is much better than before. And now I can start to interact with it. This is only the stack trace I got from clicking on the error stuff. I shouldn't do that during demo because it's not that great, but well, controller used to showcase what happens when an exception is thrown. So basically, I have no more issue with permission, but still, I have defined the final policy file. So now, it's time to choose. Blue pill or red pill? You can pretend you never attended this talk. You can pretend you never heard what I told you. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. The attached API doesn't exist. The problem is the people, the guy, or the woman sitting next to you might have heard the talk and might not be as good as you. He or she might want to use that to get some money. How to create distrust between team members. The choice is yours, basically. You can pretend everything is fine, or you can address the issue. I believe I told you that one of the reasons the policy file is not used is because it's hard to create. It takes 2 days. I hope I showed you something workable, how to create a policy file in a few hours. I believe no real-world application, it should take more than half a day using this method. So, investment, half a day. Benefits, none. Risk of not doing it, it depends. Candy Crush, not that great. Banking, aeronautics, self-driving car, medicine, health, whatever, much worse. Data can be stolen, money can be stolen, a lot of stuff can be stolen. So the responsibility is yours. I'm just trying to raise awareness that the fact that it can happen. So thanks for your attention. You can follow my blog. You can follow me on Twitter. And if you want to do the same stuff as me, there is this URL pointing to the Spring Boot repository where I have the policy files. So you can also use them. The fun part is they are not complete. I didn't commit the latest changes. So basically, you will need to work your way a bit about that. On my blog, also, I have like a series on JVM security that tries to tell in like 4 blog posts, what I told you in 1 hour. So it's a bit more detailed. You have a lot more hiccups than just the port number and the cache stuff. And now I guess we have some time for questions. Wow. Oh. Okay. Okay, the mic will come to you.
Thanks, Nicola, for a talk. Does any company, except yours, maybe use final policy files in their projects?
That's the fun part. I told you, in 17 years, I never saw a single secured JVM. Yes. But I know, for example, that Elasticsearch, there is one guy instead of the Elasticsearch team that is very keen on securing the JVM. So they have it, and normally you should use it. I don't know if you use it, but you should. At least they make it available for you to use. Yeah.
Hello. What's the performance degradation used in Security Manager?
OK. It's funny because whatever the subject I talk about, there is always a question about performance. So don't take it personally. Ты готов? Imagine if I told you, you know, you are driving since the beginning of our journey with your eyes blind. And I can show you that you can see the danger. And you tell me, yeah, but I will run more cautiously. I will drive. Yes! What is the alternative? Yeah, YOLO, you only live once. No, I mean, I don't know. I must admit, I have no clue. The thing is, anyway, you have a check whether a security manager is configured or not inside the GRE. So the performance hits that you might get is only to check the permissions. Now, we are talking about CPU cycles, probably. Is it really the limiting factor in your context? I'm not that sure. So the fast answer is it's not a question. I mean, it's not even a real choice. The second is it depends. The third answer is probably nothing that you can really measure in most of the context. I mean, if you are not doing embedded stuff, it's just, I mean, the network is like 10, 100, 1,000 times slower than the CPU. So, sorry. There must be always one. I mean, it was you. Actually, you can ask questions. I didn't want to make you afraid.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for your session. And I have a question. So as I understood, we cannot avoid using wildcards, right? And so
it depends. Yeah. What I showed you is using a Spring Boot application, you cannot avoid it. I don't know if you are using Spring Boot or not. It depends on your application, on the framework, on the libraries.
Yeah, but if we are using that, it's like kind of negates a lot of profit from that, right? So are there any approaches to when we cannot avoid using that, but are there some approaches how to fix that, how to handle with that? Because
the security manager, I didn't talk about the security manager if I want to be really precise. I talked about the default security manager. And the default security manager, this is how it works. Now, if you want, you can create your own security manager and hard code everything. And then it will be just tailored just for your own needs. However, right now you have nothing, and you want everything. I think that there is a middle ground before, because, I mean, half a day to craft a policy file is fine. I think everybody can afford it. But crafting your own security manager is harder. And then it's not just configuring it. It will be like coding the new permission, the new port, the new stuff at every time. So I'm not sure it warrants it. But this is one way you could do it, for example.
Okay, thanks.
And just quick question regarding the testing your security manager. For example, if I'm on a project, I introduce this security manager and I want to, let's say, cover that with integration tests. So you mentioned that one major leak is kind of hijacking your binaries in runtime. What other points would you recommend to be focused on in terms of testing? What other leaks should be covered in scope of those tests?
If you want to, if you want to have automated security testing, there are products for that. A lot of those products are just crap. I mean, once I got like 200 PDF reports, 200 pages reports, and in those 200 pages, there were 3 real security issues. So I think that, I'm sorry, but the market is not ready for that. What you can have is someone trying to hack the JVM, to see it. What you could do very easily is you know what your application is not supposed to do, so you could try to make those calls and check that you have the right exception. That could be one thing. And yeah, attach API. I mean, for me, this is the worst stuff. This is the worst. The attach API is really like, what? And I know someone who told me that they are using it inside their bank to update the bytecode at runtime so as not to lose time, not to waste, stop and restart the machine. Yes, in that case it works. In that case you cannot do anything, but then the updated bytecode could do you good or not good. Then they probably have other stuff, but I'm not privy to that information.
How do you deal with it? You have kind of one more setup. So on production, you run with the security manager, and let's say the developer probably has it disabled to be able to debug, and then you have maybe the test system, something goes wrong, you want to debug there, and so where do you put the border, and how do you deal with this complexity of having 2 different setups? Okay,
again, I repeat, I have never used it. I mean, I'm afraid, I'm just telling you what you shouldn't do, but I didn't do it either. I'm super honest, huh? So, in that case, it's the same for everything. I mean, again, Spring Boot allows you to remote debug, for example. They tell you, don't do it in production. It depends whether you often debug, you often need to debug, or not. It depends if you are really sure about the quality of your application and probably don't need to debug or not. That is, unfortunately, very context dependent, and again, I have no experience to tell you that what I did in my case. Sorry. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, you have mentioned about cases when we have incorrect source code at the, for example, Maven repository and with some compiled artifacts. So does Maven central repository have some, I don't know, tools which can check that the source code is the same?
No.
Somebody should protect us. Somebody there.
Помоги нам Бог. Не работает так. К сожалению. The thing is, before this talk, you trusted Maven repository, right? Чуть-чуть. Yeah, not so much. But what did you do to protect yourself from that? Yeah, praying? Yeah. So the problem is that most people do that. Right now, I'm checking how you can check the signatures. I'm writing that stuff. I'm investing and writing to have a blog post on that. That is one way. Every time you should check that the organization or the guy who signed your jar is the one he pretends he is. So first, don't accept any unsigned jars. Who here checks the signature of the jars? 1, 2, 3? No, no. That's the real problem. anybody could put any artifact on Maven Central, and you will be none the wiser. I know that Spring Boot signed its jar. I know that SLF4G signed its jar. Do you check? No. That might be the first stuff. Might be the first step. And afterwards, if you run into a very security-tight environment, the only thing that you can do is basically you need to rebuild the stuff yourself. You never accept any binary. I mean, same as in Linux or any operating system. Honestly, I don't have the energy, the time, or whatever to do that by myself. What I'm doing is I download the binary. But you shouldn't. If you are very security-oriented, you should only use the source and build it yourself. So you know, I don't teach you anything now. Other questions? Yes, I'm happy there are a lot of questions.
Can you give me an example when bad guy want to use our issue with bad security? So we are not using security manager, we use as default. So give me please an example how I can see the issue. So someone bad guy want to make attack and or what? Please can you give me more?
So basically, I am trying to repeat because I'm not sure I understood. You are in a team of developers, you run without any security manager, and somebody attacks you or try to do bad stuff, and you want to check that everything is fine,
yeah,
right?
To make protect, to use security manager, to use your way you showed us. I want to know how another man can make bad for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I showed you the attach API. Attach API is very simple. You spin off a new JVM on the same machine, whether virtual or not, and you know the PID of the first of the regular JVM. And then you can change everything, the whole bytecode. That's what I showed you when I showed you the transaction that I send like $50 from 1 to 2, and then at the end it says I send $50 from 2 to me. It's super easy. You just have to know the source code to change you have the same source code, you change it, you have the same interface with a different implementation, you change the bytecode at runtime. Fingers in the nose. Yes, other question?
One. First of all, thank you for your report or presentation. I connect to previous orator, and my question is, what if we just hide our application, some middleware application with API by Nginx, for example, and on Nginx we create rules which restrict to connect others methods which is not present in our API. And for example, on firewall, we just log all RMI ports for remote debugging. What about it? How bad guy to connect our JVM if we could, on infrastructure level, to restrict?
So that's a good question, actually. So again, I'm not a security expert, but one of the rules of security is you must consider that everything already is already compromised. And I know a lot of people who think, yeah, but look, we fortify everything on the lowest layers, and everything we will find in the upper layers. But again, I showed you the process. It's very simple. You create a library that everybody uses, and then you can commit images. And committing images, you have no way of knowing if something is bad inside. So you are already compromised because you use a bad library that you don't know about because you don't check it and you don't build from source code. And the second way is inside of your organization, someone is already doing bad stuff.
But if we have somebody in our organization, it's not checked case. It can be in any organization.
Then you have an organizational response to a security.
It's like task for penetrated tester.
Yes, but that's the issue, really. I mean,
Yeah.
you have code reviews. You check that the code is maintainable, performant, whatever. I mean, if you see someone doing wiring funds to his accounts, you will probably say, hey, no. But when images are committed, you don't check the image. And I'm saying about the image, but imagine if the guy writes the code in a way that it takes only the first character. I mean, you have different way of doing steganography. I showed you the image because it's super simple. But you have a lot of different ways to do steganography. You don't check the image. You check both images are similar. One is, OK, I accept the pull request.
But still, we should call it.
Yes, but it's normal that in some cases, you will want to read images. My point is, you are not doing it straightforwardly. You are just using the fact that, yeah, you access some file on the file system or on the class path, and inside this resource, something is hidden.
Thank you.
Thank you. But come to me afterwards because I see you are not super convinced. Ja zamietil. Ja mudry Francuz.
Hey, first of all, thank you for your presentation. And the question is that, yeah,
can you?
Yes,
yeah,
your
thanks.
target is like obvious to promote and to like raise the awareness about these problems. But let's not to promote, but enforce these things. Because I know that in banking sector there are a lot of like certification programs that each like software running in the banking system should obey some rules. So for instance, if you deal with payment cards data, you need to be compliant PCI DSS standards. So why not to, let's say, make everyone obey these rules? Or at least let them know that there is a risk and let them decide, guys, please do say, yes, we know about this and we do accept the risk.
But it's exactly what I did here.
Yeah, but if it is enforced by the certification programs, it's like more put in the law-obeying aspect.
I will have a philosophical discussion for like 30 seconds. I believe that you want rules because you come from a Slavic culture. I come from Western Europe. I tell you, hey, you have shit on your plate. If you want to eat it, that's your problem, not mine.
Yeah, but
everybody is responsible. I don't want to enforce anything. I'm just telling you, and then you decide whether it's acceptable risk or not. But you are not my customer. And if you were my customer, I would say exactly the same. You have an issue. Deal with it or suffer the consequences. If you want, I can help you deal with it. If you want to suffer the consequences, that's your problem. I wash my hands. Everybody is free to do his own stuff. But I hope that when you come back on work on Monday, you might want inside of your own company to tell, hey, you know, I heard this talk about this guy. It's not that cool if what we are doing right now. If you're a developer and you don't have access to the production environment, you will be limited. But in some companies, it might bubble and bubble and bubble. And I hope at some point, people will realize it's a huge security issue. Because, yeah, as your colleague said, everything is very secured on the lower layer. And on top, poof, free for all. It's free buffet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. OK. Thank you very much for your attention. Please check if you like this talk, please check the Exoscale website. You have the card, you can use it. Just go on it, just tweet me, follow me on Twitter, so that they send me next year for a better conference even. And thank you again.